Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Fatball Guy Racing. This is Dan Cronin, and we wanted to talk a little bit about how to attack the Oaks and Derby cards, and in general, just how to attack big days. Breeders' Cup days and Oaks and Derby Day is a lot the same stuff. Big fields, big races, big pools, and some days, like maybe the Belmont Day or Travers Day, sometimes you look at cards and you'll say, man, this looks chalky. But usually on Oaks and Derby Day, it does not look like that. And you can attack these days. And that's why I try to go after these days as hard as I go after any day the whole year because of the big pools. Now, you have to have a plan. You can't just go in there and walk in with your significant other and your four buddies and your $500 in your pocket, not prepared, drinking alcohol, eating food, goofing around, not paying attention, and think you're going to win. It's just not going to happen. You have to be prepared. Just like playing around a golf, the professionals are prepared. The guy that plays once a month is not prepared. He comes strolling in, he doesn't stretch, his shoes are dirty, his clubs are dirty, he hasn't walked the course, he just starts hitting on the first tee, and you wonder why you shoot 105. It's the same thing in horse racing, guys and gals. It's the same thing. So I just want to go through a little bit of what I do and what I try to show our guys to do. And number one and foremost is you got to have a budget. If you don't have a budget and you don't know what you want to spend and you are not prepared, you have no chance. Whether that's 300 or 300 a piece with a buddy, or like my dad and I do a lot, 300 a piece, 500 a piece, toss it in, map out our plan the night before, and we're ready to go. We know exactly what races we're going to attack, exactly what horses we want to attack. We don't just go in and say, okay, we're going to bet this pick 4 by 4 by 3 by 3. That is an absolute horrible way to play. If you are playing pick 4s like that, you have no chance to ever hit big. You have no chance to ever throttle one. I am begging you not to do that. The 3 by 4 by 3 by 4 methods, you just can't win doing that, because by logic, by just sheer reading the form and looking at odds, most people are going to end up with 4 of the 5 favorites, 3 of the 4 favorites, and if you win, it just can't pay that much. I mean, let's be logical here. If a 30-1 wins that race, the chances of you having it, other than betting your birthday or your social security number, you're not going to have it most times. I mean, even the best of the best handicappers have a hard time getting to 30 and 40 to 1s when they're betting real money. It's easy to do when you're betting fake $2 in contests because it's not your money. You're just goofing around, trying to stab, hit lightning, and it's part of the deal in those contests. But when you're betting real money, there isn't many people that can come up with 30 and 40 to 1s and actually bet their money. So, how do you come up with them horses? How do you get those horses? Well, I can tell you how I've won when I had some of my biggest hits of my life, and we'll go through those here right now. If you guys remember Breeders' Cup Day when Goldakova ran at Churchill Downs and Blame and Zenyatta ran in a Classic, I used the ticket maker sheet. Anybody that gets DRF, you get formulator, you get ticket maker. I invite everybody to please, on Derby days, Oaks days, Breeders' Cup days, you must use the ticket maker. You plug your budget in, whether it's 200, 300, 400, whatever it may be. Even if you're a small player and it's $50, I invite you to get a partner then. But it's still the same thing. You put your A horses in, you put your B horses in, you can play it back and forth. How I hit that big ticket is I said, Goldakova's a cinch, I'm singling Goldakova. Now, most people are sitting there going, well, how in the world did you have a big hit with Goldakova? She was even money. Well, I'm going to tell you how I did it. I had Goldakova singled. Now in the dirt mile, I took all. Now, I couldn't afford to take all as A horses, so I split it. I took 6, I think it was 12 horse field, maybe 14, I can't remember, but I took half of them as A's, half of them as B's. Then I went into the turf race. I said, one of these European horses have to win. There was like 4 of them in the race. I don't care who's who. I don't want to hear who's better. I just know a Euro wins that turf race all the time. So boom, I took all the Euros. So then I said, who can win the Classic? Only Blamans and Yada I thought could win the Classic. So I took Blamans and Yada as A and B, and then I put my budget in, and it popped up. Well, you can have, if all your A horses win, you'll have this thing 12 times. If all your B horses, if 2 of your B horses win, you'll have it 6 times. And that's the way I played it, and I ended up hitting 6 50-cent tickets. And as you know, it paid, like, if I remember right, like $4,000 or $5,000 a ticket. Now, I didn't play that much money, and I still was able to hit a ticket like that. On Derby Day, when Animal Kingdom won, very similar style ticket, the same way. The year Street Sense won the Derby. What I did is I singled Street Sense, and I spread in the Woodford Reserve to all. I had 6 A's, 6 B's, and happened to catch, the longest shot on the board there. One paid like $30 or so. End up having to pick 4 several times again, and my budget was not gigantic. I think I spent $300 or $400, and I hit it like 6 times. And when you're talking a 50-cent pick 4 at $3,000 or $2,000, those are huge hits. So there's no reason why a medium-sized, a small-sized player that's there with their buddies that are throwing money in can't do the same thing. I'm begging you, get the ticket maker, play around with it, move horses from A to B. You'll see your budget right there. It'll put it right on the screen for you. Now, if you're too small of a player, I understand. You can also use the ticket maker for pick 3s. There's no reason why a smaller player, you can't afford the pick 4, play the pick 3. I'm telling you, the pick 3 still, you can get $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 pick 3s. You don't have to be like what the guy sitting next to me on Derby Day hit for last year. You don't have to have a straight $100 one. He got lucky, hit a straight $100 one, and boom, he gets $21,000. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm saying that smaller players can bet very similar using the ticket maker by constructing the ticket. I'm begging you to go play with that on DRF ticket maker. Now, do I use Brisnet? Yes, I use Brisnet. I think Brisnet is very good with the top boxes on sprint dirt races. I think you need to pay attention to who they've got in those boxes. I'm not as big on the Brisnet numbers, but the top boxes I do pay attention to. If they're in the top 3 in those boxes, I want to make sure, unless I'm singling in that race, I don't miss one of those horses in there. I'm not wild about Brisnet in turf races, but in dirt sprints, I do use them. How do I use Thoroughgraph? I use Thoroughgraph or the rag sheets more on pattern than I do on what the numbers are. But on Derby Day, I'm looking for patterns of horses that may leap forward or at least match what they did the last time. So if they've paired some numbers up, just to use this as an example, if a horse ran a 4 and a 4, he might go forward to a 1 or a 2. The lower the number, the better. If a horse went from a 10 to a 9 to a 2, well, his next start, he's probably not going to run a 0. Now, he may run a 2, but he's probably not going to move forward again because he leaped forward so much the first time. So I use that as kind of a pattern thing. I'm not as into Thoroughgraph as I am the formulator. I'm a big formulator guy. But I believe in preparation. I believe in having your plan laid out the night before. Do not walk into that track and bet a bunch on emotion. I do the same thing when I'm at the track. You're losing a little bit, and all of a sudden you bet more. And then you lose a little bit, and now you're going to make a bet that you didn't plan on making. If you can develop at least 80 to 90% of your tickets by sitting the night before and mapping it out, I've got a $500 budget, I've got a $300 budget. Get on the phone with your buddy that's going with you the next day and prepare. We're both going to throw up $200 or $300, and we're going to bet together. Look at Oaks and Derby Day, guys. There is, I believe, 8 pick 4s and 6 pick 5s over the 2 days. I mean, that is a ton. Nobody can play all those bets. If you try to play all those bets, you're going to be spread so thin, you're not going to be able to do that. But pick the races that you like the best. Then also pick the races you think are completely wide open. And hopefully there's a pick 4 in there or a pick 3 in there, because you want a wide open race. You want a race that you think at 20 to 1, at 10 to 1, at 8 to 1 have a big shot. But then you want to put it together with a race that you really like. A few years ago, I loved Jessica Starr, was 8-1. I was able to tie her into all, or it was a him, but you know, it's Jessica Starr, you'd think it's a filly. Was able to tie that horse into all these different bets. And yeah, I bet a little straight, but I had pick threes and doubles and all this other stuff into that horse. And that was all about preparation. 2 years ago, I was able to hit a $30,000 rolling bet, pick threes and pick fours with a draw-in horse. A horse, I think the name of the horse was Awesome Jill, if I remember right, that drew in on Derby weekend, was in the also eligibles at 13 or 14, drew into the race. I knew the outside stalkers were winning, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Please pay attention to who's winning. Every year on Derby week, there gets some tendencies going because they soup that track up. Last year, anybody could see that the outside stalking speed horses on the dirt had a huge advantage. Every race, the Sharp Aztecas, the Terraces were running huge. I mean, if you weren't in the middle to the outside and you weren't close to the pace last year on Derby Day and Oaks Day, I mean, even Catherine, Sophia, and Nyquist were the same similar styles. You had to be that style or you couldn't win. Please pay attention to that, because even if you got help from people like myself or other people out there that are helping, you know, we're doing sheets 2 days before, and, you know, if it changes that day, you got to be able to adjust and say, man, look at the results, the 9, the 8, the 9, the 10. They're all winning. They're all hitting the board. Maybe we need to look a little bit more at these outside horses. Who's got speed? And toss them into your tickets. Make adjustments, but have your plan and be ready. I'm telling you, that's 9 times out of 10. That's how you hit. If you're not doing it, you're not going to be able to hit. Now, the last thing I wanted to tell you is this. My dad taught me this a long, long time ago. 1 times 10 is less than 4 times 3. 1 times 10 and 10 times 1 added together is the same as 4 times 5. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're trying to hit a big one in the pick 4, your chances of hitting a big, big ticket going 1 times 10 is great. Trying to hit a ticket 4 times 3 or 5 times 4 is like this. And why is that? Because at 1 times 10 and 10 times 1, you need one of your 2 horses you like the best to win. You don't care who wins the other race. You got to be right once. And yes, you got to be right. You got 2 chances to be right. 10 times 1, 1 times 10. The other ticket, you're 4 times 5 or 3 times 4. Well, who do you probably have on those tickets? You probably don't have the 30-1 or 40-1. So if that bomb hits, ticket A, you got it. If your main horse wins. Now you're 3-1 by 30-1 in the pick 3 or pick 4. You got a chance at a monster hit if you can finish this. Over here, your ticket's on the ground, isn't it? It's on the ground. Unless you were the lucky one to somehow stab a 30 or 40-1 with your 3 horses or with your 4 horses in a 12-horse field. Let's be honest. Most of the time, you can't do that. I can't do that. I can't tell you how many times I've thrown tickets on the ground, or I've had 6 out of 12, 7 out of 12, because some 28-1 shot won. If you're 1 by 10, 10 by 1, yes, you'll miss some, but you have a better chance to hit that knock it out of the park, $30,000 pick 3 or pick 4 when everybody looks around and says, and this happened to me, how in the world did you have Dakota Phone? I took all. That's how I had Dakota Phone. How did you have Danish Dynaformer in the Woodford Reserve? I took all. How did you have Dangerous Midge? I took all the Euros. It wasn't that hard. I didn't really handicap it. I just took all the Euros. When Euros run on Derby Day and Oaks Day, if they ship in, you got to take them. If Chad Browns come in, you got to look hard. Todd Pletcher's, you got to look hard. But you also have to look at those horses that have an affinity for Churchill Downs, the Divisidoros, even like McCracken in the Derby this year. I know his numbers are light, but please be careful tossing him out. He just loves Churchill. And you'll notice there's a million work guys out there now. Who's working well? Who's ready? Just please, I'm begging you, Don't go to the Oaks and Derby with $500 in your pocket and not be prepared, and by noon you're drunk. Please, I'm begging you, be prepared and be ready. Thanks. This is the Fat Ball Guy, and hopefully we'll talk soon.